MS Now is out with exclusive new reporting on a disturbing trend that's happening at immigration detention centers all around our country, impacting the youngest detainees. In the first partnership with the Marshall Project, my colleague Jacob Sobroff reports on how 500 babies and toddlers have been held in ICE detention since Donald Trump became president again last year. According to that reporting, quote, ICE has dramatically increased detentions of children aged 3 and under, holding 25 of them in custody on an average day between January of 2025 and March of this year. That number is 10 times higher than it was in the previous 12 months under former President Joe Biden. Back then, on an average day, fewer than 3 babies and toddlers were held at facilities across the country. That age is a crucial time for the human brain to develop, and concern is growing over the lifelong damage being done to those babies and toddlers. Jacob spoke to a couple who fled Russia over their opposition to the war in Ukraine, worried about what spending months at the Dilley Detention Center has done to their 1-year-old son, Amir. Here they are speaking through translators.
You left Russia because you didn't want to go to prison. Yet you get to the United States of America and you end up in a place that to you feels like a prison. What was that like for you?
We came here to escape prison. We wanted to be free. But once we arrived in America, we spent 4 months in detention.
4 months in detention.
118 days, to be exact.
Gotcha! It's crazy to hold your son like this and look at this beautiful child in the face and think that for 118 days, the 3 of you were locked up in a prison for families in the United States. I cannot imagine what it was like for you.
It was very hard not knowing when they would let us go, where we would go, or if they were going to deport us.
MS Now and the Marshall Project reached out to DHS, but the agency declined to answer specific questions after we refused to provide identifying information about our sources. DHS and ICE did, however, dismiss claims against Dilley, calling them, quote, media lies. Jacob Sobroff is still with me and joining our coverage, former DHS official and White House advisor, founder of America's Promise and senior fellow at Forward U.S., Andrea Flores. Jacob, take us through the reporting.
Well, I first want to say how grateful I am to both Kay Guerrero, my colleague here at MS Now, and our partners at the Marshall Project. This is the first in a series of reporting partnerships that we're going to be doing with the Marshall Project. And along with the Marshall Project, we at MS Now analyze data from the Deportation Data Project, publicly available data about this largest mass deportation effort in American history, and uncovered. It was really plainly available for anyone to see, but it takes an in-depth analysis, like only the Marshall Project can do, to see that 500 children, babies and toddlers, have been detained by this administration since the very beginning, many of them over the 20-day period under statute, the Flores Settlement Agreement, that is allowed under law. The Biden administration didn't detain any children in this age group for that amount of time, over 20 days. But our reporting found that so many of these children have been held, like Amir, 118 days in the Dilley Detention Center in Texas, where I went with Congressman Joaquin Castro to see these conditions and the allegations of the situation inside that facility. We have heard so many people talk about this. Unsanitary conditions, improper food, access to baby formula, but not clean water to go along with the baby formula. Little Amir, who you're looking at here, I went to visit in Sacramento, basically could only say the words mom and dad by the time he got out of there, had such a regression in his development as a little child. And remember, during family separation, they called it government-sanctioned child abuse. They called it torture, according to the UN definition. That was Physicians for Human Rights. This is a different version of the same political strategy that really is just masking cruelty towards children. I think anybody who is a child welfare expert would tell you that. And these kids, and go read our story on MS Now, ms.now right now, will have a lifetime of trauma because of what they're experiencing right now under this administration, all in the service of Donald Trump's political goals.
Well, even the people that voted for him, I like to think, didn't vote for this. I mean, this was about criminals. This was about violence. The videos that he showed at his rallies before he came out and talked were about violent crimes carried out on American streets and cities. I mean, none of these families have committed any crimes, let alone violent crimes.
How about this case? And it wasn't that hard to find. Alsu and Azat, Amir's parents, fled Russia because they were going to be political prisoners for opposing the war in Ukraine. When they showed up here, ostensibly allies of this country and political asylum seekers, they were put into detention for 4 months, and their child, according to them, was mistreated by not just by the United States government, but by CoreCivic, which is important to underline, a for-profit prison company detaining children and making money off of it. Of course, as you said, DHS and ICE and CoreCivic all say that this is a family-friendly environment, that kids are treated well, that these are up to standards, that everybody's going to be okay once they're inside there. But the facts that were uncovered in this investigation show that just on the numbers alone, kids are being held longer than they're supposed to under the law in a facility like this, whether they are treated well or not.
Andrea, what is the best case scenario for how to shed light on what's happening to young kids and families?
Well, I think that Congressman Joaquin Castro has been leading the way in exposing what's happening at a facility like the Dilley Family Detention Center. But I think that Democrats in this midterm year need to be far more direct and say that family detention is not necessary to enforce immigration law. And they really need to be doing a more unified call to shut that facility down, because there is no legal reason that a family needed to have been in detention for over 100 days. We know that there is essentially no safe way to detain a child. And this is really just a well-recorded aberration. As Jacob said, it's not hard to find these cases. And going back to what people voted for, what they didn't vote for, to do mass deportations, it was always going to require mass detentions because it's part of the cycle to deport people. And so it's really going to get far worse before it gets better. So if you do not succeed in shutting down some of these facilities and also cutting some of these privatization, looking at the contracts, really exposing the corruption of these contracts. This is a system that when I worked for the Obama administration, right, they got rid of private prison contracts in the federal prisons, but they left them in immigration detention centers. So there is work to be done if Democrats are going to regain power. But I think a first basic ask is to close Dilley.
What do you know from these interviews and your reporting about what else is going on?
The bottom line is when they're inside these facilities, it's a circumstance that I don't think anybody who is a parent of a child of any age would want to be in. The allegations include lights being on overnight. Alsu and Azat said they had to steal food in order to feed baby Amir so that he was nourished enough, because the food that they were getting was not age appropriate for the child. The bedding situation, you name it, they could tell you that it wasn't the type of care nor custody that they would want to put their child in. And like I said, when I was sitting there across from them in Sacramento, look at this beautiful boy. The idea that a child, let's just slow down and say it. The fact that we have prisons and jails for families in the United States of America
it's insane.
Is an insane thing to say. And these people are here to seek political asylum because they feel like they will be thrown into a place like this ultimately. So this weekend on Saturday, we're going to run almost the entire 17-minute report on my show, starting at 10 a.m. on the East Coast, because we feel like it's so important for people to spend time with us and sit in it, really marinate in it. Look at what Joaquin Castro is doing by bringing his colleagues down there. Over and over again, he has gone in to try to pull individual cases, kids, out of this facility. But there are still children, as we sit here, 25 on average a day, that are locked up in immigration custody, and that still is going on. And we only have data up until March of this year. We don't know what has happened since March. And that's why we're going to continue to dig on it.
Andrea, I take your point about Democrats, but Republicans are the ones who vote to continue to fund these centers. What is I asked you about the best case scenario. What is the best case scenario for holding Republicans accountable for something more cruel than even what Trump did in the first term?
Well, Republicans in the House should not be funding the president's budget requests to give even, a huge historic sum for the next 2 years to ICE to continue to run these contracts. But they're going to. Senate Republicans did. They put in no accountability features for these family detention facilities, which isn't a surprise because while we're talking about detention, this administration is doing something we've never seen in the immigration detention context, which is they call it a choice because their goal is not to make the conditions livable or adhere to legal standards. Their goal is to make them so miserable that people self-deport. They put that in every statement. They say detention is a choice. You can leave. And so this is how they're really putting the pressure on families. And so Republicans, once again, this is a midterm election year. It's why Democrats do need to crank up that contrast, because Republicans are about to vote to fund and expand this type of system into warehouses, into other facilities that are even less fit than Dilley to hold children. So I keep saying this will get worse because there are unfettered resources that Republicans are giving to Trump for mass deportations. And so I think voters really need to understand what that means going forward.